Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the State of Hoops podcast. This is your co-host, Todd Schlekeway, along with co-host Nate Malchow. How are you doing today?
Great, Schleck. When the temperatures hit below zero, it's basketball season, and we get through in South Dakota, and I think people like coming indoors for the sport. But we are so excited about our guest today. A longtime South Dakota basketball name, a legendary basketball family. We're going to be speaking with Lance Luitjens, one of our all-time greats for basketball in the state, and talking about the legacy of his father, Larry, and the legacy of his coaching career. Lance, welcome. We're so happy to have you on and talk some hoops with you.
There's not much I would rather be doing right now, because I definitely don't want to be outside. So it's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and it's been great, Lance. My oldest son is a freshman at Roosevelt High School, and so I've really enjoyed connecting with you at the games and the school functions, and really blessed that you're an administrator over there where my son's at. And South Dakota basketball is such a small world. Just for the audience's sake, Lance's dad, Larry, is from Britton, South Dakota. My dad is from Britton, South Dakota. My dad was a longtime coach. Larry was obviously a longtime coach. We're going to spend our episode today honoring Larry Luitjens' legacy. But yeah, it's just a small world, 1 degree of separation, Lance.
It is. I wrote a book, which I'm sure we'll highlight in part. There's a chapter of the book that talks about all of the connections that you have in basketball, and kind of likened it to going into a crime scene room where you just have the thread that's just being attached to all these different places. And it's just unbelievable how they all somehow intertwine together and come back to someone, and an impact that someone had somewhere. That's South Dakota.
And we're going to get Lance on another episode, a future episode, because he's going to be part of our Legends series. But something tells me Lance would rather talk about his dad than himself anyway. So this is going to be right up Lance's alley. And Lance's father, Larry, really the numbers are familiar with all South Dakota basketball fans. All-time winningest boys basketball coach with 748 wins, many state championships, both at the Smet and later at Custer, Hall of Fame credentials, who's in the South Dakota Sports Hall of Fame and many other Hall of Fames. But what we want to do today on this episode is have Lance kind of peel back the curtain and not really talk about the milestones from a numbers standpoint, but talk about the impact Coach Luitjens had and share some of those stories. And so we're excited to really dive in. And Lance, I think we kind of wanted to get started. Your dad during his tenure at the Smet, and ironically, when you want to talk about South Dakota communities who have a proud basketball tradition, the Smet is one of them, and you married into that tradition, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Here we start talking about how those connections happen again. But, my dad was into Smet from 67 to 72, right around those years. And then my wife and the Ostas family moved into DeSmet 72, 73. So, they may have crossed U-Haul trailers. One was coming in, one was going out. And, who would have thunk it that I would marry a DeSmet Bulldog?
And remember watching you, Lance, that's probably when I first got to know you just personally a little bit, and watching both you and Renee play for Northern State University back in the mid-90s. And I know the Ossis family was in Aberdeen at that time, and family friends of ours. So again, you talk about the small world and how those things work out, and that's awesome with that connection with your dad, and then also marrying into that community as well.
Yeah, I think I got the best end of that deal. The two of us end up meeting up there at Northern, and the rest is history. So
now, Lance, I want to back up just briefly before we talk about the DeSmet days. Larry Luitjens started his career in Webster as an assistant coach. Is that correct?
Yeah, right out of college, he played basketball at Northern, and
Yes.
then right out of college, he got an assistant coaching position in Webster.
And he was an assistant for Bob Swanhorst on the 1965 Class A state championship team. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yep.
Okay.
So he started off his coaching career with a state championship as an assistant coach.
Okay. So I think we have to add that background, because when we talk to a lot of we have a lot of our great head coaches that start as assistants and just learn the process. And our winningest boys basketball coach in South Dakota history started that process his coaching career as an assistant and learned and brought those lessons further with him. So I think that's an important note that he was a part of those successful teams at Webster.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, it was fun talking to him about that, because those are a lot of the things that I didn't know, growing up. We never talked about that. And then when it came time to help write this book and kind of go back through, I got to hear some Webster stories. I got to hear some of the things that kind of shaped him as a coach. And sure enough, it was as an assistant coach, that he got his start. So that's a great point.
What are some of the stories you can recall that Larry shared with you, Lance, uh, about his Smet tenure? I know it culminated in two state championships. Am I correct? 1970, 71, two state titles. What are some stories that you can recall, or some former players, who've shared anecdotes with you through the years from Larry's Smet tenure?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I got to know some of the DeSmit, some of those DeSmit connections back in the 60, 68, 69, 70, 71. Some of them I got to know after my dad passed. And we were just looking for some stories. Some of it was through writing the book, but they said that he came in to DeSmit with that mindset that every year the goal is to win a state championship. And the difference, I was talking to Rick Tibbetts, and Rick Tibbetts played for my dad there in the DeSmit years. And he said that he was from Bancroft, and Bancroft was closing, and kids at Bancroft had a choice where they were going to go. And he said, Larry Luitjens came to each of our houses and talked to our parents and said, I want your son to be part of our program, and it wasn't, you could say, well, that's recruiting. Well, they had to go somewhere. But he just said that it was amazing that right away they felt like, we want to be part of this winning program. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think that's what he was trying to create, there in DeSmit. And they came just a little short the very first year that he was there making the state tournament. And the next year was 1969. Those people who are historians in South Dakota will still say that the 1969 state championship game was the best state championship game ever played. 93-90 with Oneida, no 3-point line. DeSmit ended up coming up short in that one, but just the games that legends are made of. Some of the things that when I really start talking about those DeSmit years was that after that game, my dad's, he said that I just specifically said, okay, to win this next year, here's what we're going to have to do. And then he just immediately went in with those players, the Jenks, the Longs, and several others. And he started developing them so that next year, they would be sitting in a position where they could win it all. And they ended up going back-to-back state champions there in DeSmit.
And I think about some of those early years, Lance. You mentioned Rick Tibbetts. I believe he's a cousin of Fred Tibbetts, who
Yes.
legendary girls coach. I had the fortunate opportunity to coach with Fred for 4 years at Roosevelt High School when I was starting my coaching career. Fred specifically mentioned Coach Luitjens, Coach Larry Luitjens, and those DeSmit teams as an early inspiration for his career. And it's interesting, the parallels that I'm hearing from the story now about Larry getting out and selling the program and getting people excited to play and getting a community behind you. I mean, those are exact parallels with the success that Fred had. And I had many conversations with Fred too, where he credited Larry as one of his most important mentors and an inspiration for what he wanted to do with his programs. And then also talked a lot about the fast break. If you look at those 70 and 71 teams, I think what Larry was doing from a coaching standpoint and X's and O's, and what I look at, I mean, look at the scoring, 93-90 in the 69 state championship team, but then you fine tune it in 70, 71 and continue to score a lot of points, fast breaking, and probably going against the grain to a degree with some great scheme right there and having a lot of success with it. So just wanted to add that to the Smet days and the things that I have heard and experienced with that. Special time in that town.
Yeah, and it's so interesting when you talk about good coaches. You bring up Fred Tibbetts, and each good coach, I don't think you'll ever hear a coach say, I made myself. I'm a good coach because of me. You're going to hear them say, you know what I picked up from this person is this. And then I picked up this from someone else. And it was so fun talking to my dad about that, because he talked about his high school coach. And he said that, one thing I learned from my high school coach, I'm never going to lose to the same team twice. And he said, you might get us once, but now I'm going to put in the preparation that specifically says you're not getting us twice. And he had that type of mentality throughout his whole coaching career. At Northern, he was coached by Bob Walks, and he learned what toughness was, and he learned what defense was. And he took that from him. He took something from Webster. He took something from everyone that he came into contact with. And I was talking to Tim Hazlett, who's the principal at Roosevelt right now, and Lane Austinson is another player that I played with. And, they both said that he was a constant learner. He was trying to take something from another coach, even after he had 7 state championships. And so I think that, that started back in those Smet days.
Well, as coaches, we can learn some humility and learn to be humble and continue to grow. And I think that sets the tone for his longevity and his great coaching career, is that you're willing to learn, you're willing to adapt, and move forward. And that's what we're going to hit on this episode with some of those coaching stops.
Awesome.
So now I want to transition, Lance. Your dad won that title at Webster as an assistant coach, wins 2 at the Smet, and set out for private school in North Dakota, New England St. Mary's, and all Hall of Fame type coaches experience adversity at some point in their career. And reading your dad's book that we'll talk about later, Larry Luitjens' coaching, was very open and honest about that year there and how that actually helped his coaching later. You want to talk a little bit about did Larry share any insights from that year with you?
Yeah, he did. It was interesting because the numbers will surprise people, but he had won the 2 state championships, and he was recruited by the father of the school, and sight unseen, the father said, "Hey, we want you to come here. We think we've got a great team, and we'll take your $8,000 a year salary and we'll make it $19,000." And so, my dad was like, done. When do I start? Let's go. And in hindsight, I don't think he would have wanted to have made that move, but he went there and had a lot of success early. They were ranked first or second in state. I can't remember right now. And the person that hired him was on a sabbatical in California or something like that to start the year. And when they came back midway through the year and he saw the style of play, they said, that style just isn't very Christian-like. This run and jump and press and fast break and all this man-to-man stuff. Coach, I want you to go zone, and I want you to walk the ball up the floor. And he said, well, that's not what I do. 93-90 in a championship game, you think they're walking the ball up the floor? And so he looked at him and he said, well, then you better win the state championship. Lo and behold, they're in the region championship to go to the state tournament against one of the better teams in the state. And someone hits a 40-foot shot at the buzzer, banks it in, and they knock him off on a Saturday night, upset New England St. Mary's on a Saturday night. And on Monday, he was fired. And he said, take your belongings, you're out. So it was a humbling experience for my dad. He thought he was done. It was interesting talking to him because he said, I kind of just thought every season ended in a state championship game. I experienced it in Webster. Then we went to the Smet, and 3 out of the 4 years there were in the state championship game. So it really rocked him. And he just went back home to Britain, and he was going to be a farmer. And he was, just spent some time working for his stepdad there at a gas station. And, he had a brother that was a senior in high school back then for the Britain Braves. And kind of a cool story. And I know we were talking about New England St. Mary's there, but I'm transitioning you here a little bit, Todd. As difficult as that was, my dad said, I was down at the VFW and the head coach was there. He was having a couple beers and he said, Larry, you're not doing anything. How about you help me coach? Would you be my scouting coordinator and then just kind of meet with me to strategize games? And the interesting thing is that my dad, knowing that his brother's on the team, my dad said, I tell you what, if you commit to not drinking any beer during the season, I'll help you out. And he agreed to it. Britain went on year to win the state championship with his brother on the team. And let's just say that the juices came back and he was ready to get going again.
That's a great story that it was laid out in detail in your dad's book, Lance. One interesting note talking about South Dakota connections. My uncle Wayne Schlekeway, who was 2 years younger than my dad, played at Northern. Believe it or not, was Larry's assistant that year at New England St. Mary's. Who would have thought that? My uncle Wayne has mentioned that to me before. He later went on to a long career in education and coaching out in Las Vegas. But yeah, what a small world. My uncle Wayne was Larry's assistant that 1 year at New England St. Mary's.
Yeah, just another example of the small world South Dakota that we live in.
Well, and I will say that Larry Luitjens probably had to be the most successful scouting coordinator for a high school basketball team that South Dakota has seen. Again, the message and the legacy right here as we move into it. Young coaches are going to come upon some hard times. All coaches are going to come upon some hard times where you have a tough loss or maybe a tough experience, but you keep grinding, you keep working, you keep finding a way to get up and keep rolling ahead. So what a message right there. And you're talking about getting that feel and getting that excitement back for Coach Luitjens, scouting and helping out with that. And we're setting the stage for some great things out in the Black Hills.
Yes, that was kind of what reignited the flame and led him to where he was a coach for 40 some years out in Custer.
We're going to transition now to several sponsor ads. The South Dakota High School Basketball Hall of Fame. Love South Dakota hoops? Discover the legacy at the South Dakota High School Basketball Hall of Fame, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving our state's rich basketball history for generations to come. Visit their incredible exhibits at the Sanford, Pentagon, and Sioux Falls and explore stories, milestones, and legends online at www.sdbbhof.com. From iconic players and coaches to unforgettable teams, this is South Dakota basketball. Check out the organization's rebranded website again at www.sdbbhof.com and be part of the tradition.
And if you're looking for high quality custom gear, look no further than Park Bench Apparel, your South Dakota owned print shop. Park Bench Apparel specializes in screen printing, embroidery, laser and UV printing, plus unique giftware for every occasion. Outfitting your company or team, they have you covered. Go with the fully customized team stores and corporate apparel. Find Park Bench Apparel at South Dakota High School Activities Association events and follow the action on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Park Bench Apparel, wear an adventure.
All right, Lance, let's transition to the Custer years. What did your dad share with you about how that opportunity in Custer came about? To uproot himself to the other side of the state, get that opportunity to coach the Custer Wildcats.
It's going to be hard to tell this story in a short amount of time because we go back to all these connections that were being made. My dad was first recruited to come out there from Pastor Dick Bonson, who was across the alley from him growing up in Britain. And he was kind of that father figure that my dad never had. My dad's dad died when he was 1.5 years old. He wasn't close to his stepdad. So Dick Bonson became that father figure for him. And Dick Bonson ends up getting this job out in Custer and was recruiting him to come out. He said, "Hey, we're looking for a coach." And so that's really how it started. And my dad had said no, and he came to him a second time. And so, he went out for the interview there and, ended up taking the job in Custer. He had a couple different opportunities at some different places. It was interesting that he chose Custer because they did not have a tradition of winning. They didn't have a tradition of excellence. And, every position he had experienced so far, he was stepping into something that was already self-made. It was already, DeSmet already had a good team and a foundation. New England St. Mary's was already supposed to be really good. And that was not the case for Custer. They did say, "Coach, we had a great 8th grade crew that'll be freshmen next year. We haven't had a lot of success, but we really feel like we could make something here." And, so I think it was a different challenge for him to say, I want to take something and see if I can turn around the culture of a community and create something. And that's really what he went into in his start in Custer.
And then one of the things I want to get into early on when he was building a program, at that time in the early 70s, it not only in the Black Hills, but in South Dakota, there was a lot of racial unrest, Lance. And I believe, the American Indian movement, I know this because, a few years later, my dad went to Todd County in Mission, South Dakota, and actually took the job at Mission. And I believe there was a courthouse that burned down in Custer. The reason I'm mentioning this is I believe your dad played a huge role in racial reconciliation, and that transcends basketball, Lance. But did your dad ever share any stories about what the climate was like at that time in Custer?
Yeah, he did. He didn't really know what he was getting into. There was a kind of a murder that had happened in Custer County, and it was being tried at the courthouse. And it probably was not the most fair of a trial. And they said that the Native American guy was guilty, or the white guy was innocent. I think that's more of what it was. And there was a riot, and they burned down the courthouse. And it was extremely tempestuous there in Custer when he got there. This was in the spring. He took the job in the summer. And one of the first things that my dad remembers, he said that the athletic director and the superintendent, they both came to him and they said, "Listen, we're going to try to get we're going to try to get a schedule together for you, because we're not going to play the Indian teams because of everything that's going on right now." And my dad, he was against it. He said, "No, we're going to play them. I want to play them. You cannot find better basketball and people that have that mentality. It's going to help make us better, make us stronger. You are not taking them off the schedule." And so in those early years, I mean, it was not pretty. He went down to play in Pine Ridge and in Red Cloud, and had to have police escorts, where people were following the bus and throwing rocks and all kinds of things. But he just insisted that this is good basketball. I want my kids to experience this, and just, constantly was just showing what he thought basketball was about. He said basketball is something that kind of takes race out of it, and it's just athletes on a floor competing. And that was his mentality there. And it started to, it started to make waves on the Indian reservation, because they couldn't get games. This was back in a time where any team that was in the state that was not a native team said, "We're not going to play you." And so they were having to go out of state to get games. And it's what first started the All Indian Tournament, is what they called it. It's now known as the Lakota Nation Invitation. And that All Indian Tournament started at Pine Ridge, and it got way too big for Pine Ridge, and they had to move it into the Civic Center in Rapid City. And during all of these years, my dad just continually maintained a really good relationship with a lot of those coaches, and started to earn the respect of many of those schools, teams, fans, etc. And he tells the story, and I've talked with a couple of the people that were instrumental in this from Pine Ridge, and they kind of got together and they said, "We want to invite Custer to the All Indian Tournament, but it's an All Indian Tournament. What are we going to do?" And so they said, "Well, let's change the name to Lakota Nation Invitation, and we will invite one school, Custer." And that's how the Lakota Nation Invitation, which is now a 16-team teams are playing 4 or 5 games. They do all kinds of different sports, but that's how it got its name. Was, you got Brian Brewer and a Cooney that got together and said, "What can we do to get Custer into this tournament?" And so you go back to those times that you were talking about there, Todd, when it was just the racial tensions were so strong. And to see what my dad was able to do, and was able to build this relationship of basketball, which is a common thing between his love and the love of the Native American kids, love basketball, to the point that, we just had incredible relationships, and just still to this day, if anybody knows anything about basketball and you go on the reservation and you say Larry Luitjens' name, you'll just see him light up. Had somebody reach out to me on Facebook. I didn't know who it was at first. And he just said, "I just wanted to talk to you because I want to talk to you about your dad." And, he played for Crow Creek, and he was He was on the team when we beat Crow Creek my senior year by 1 point in a crazy game, but he wanted to talk to me because he wanted to talk about my dad. And so just where that went from the 70s through the 90s and what it did for the racial relationships, in my mind is just unbelievable.
Obviously, things bigger than basketball on
Yes.
that, but the use of basketball to form these relationships. And we had an opportunity, Lance, to have Dale Pine Jr. on, and talked about the history of the Lakota Nation Invitational and kind of the advent of the growth of the of the tournament to move to Rapid City. And that's a great backstory there too, with how Custer was respected enough to get into that unbelievable event and just kind of using basketball to form positive relationships and just a sense of togetherness is an awesome story.
Yeah, and it's the most unlikely story to happen when you're talking Custer. And then you go back to, the Battle of the Little Bighorn with Custer. And I mean, there's so much rich history there. And yet this is something that some of my fondest memories are that Lakota Nation Invitation tournament that I have from my playing days, and still have, friends that I talk to today that were playing on those teams, the Bow LeBeaus and the Brewers and the Pouriers, and the list just keeps going of people that, here's an interesting story that I'll throw out. You wanted some stories that aren't in the book. We used to get calls, and for those of you younger people that are listening to this right now, there used to not be caller ID. And so when the phone rang, you answered it. And I would get, my dad would pick up the phone, and it's Jude Fairbanks and Bo LeBeau calling from Red Cloud. And they were just like, "Coach, how's it going? We just wanted to talk." And they just wanted to talk. I remember one time, I answered the phone because I happened to be awake, and it was about 1 a.m. Here it is, a call from someone on the reservation, and they were just thrilled that I answered the phone and we talked basketball. Kind of an interesting story when you talk about where things went from the 70s to the 80s, 90s.
Well, it was the ultimate symbolic sign of respect, Lance, that I can remember Larry being presented, Coach Luitjens being presented on many occasions with star quilts, and he returned that favor. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Coach Luitjens would often wear a Native American dream catcher circle as part of his coaching attire. Do you want to talk about that? That seemed to be a pretty consistent part of his coaching wardrobe.
It was, he wore that often. He always wore it in the Lakota Nation, but I mean, he wore it in the state tournament. He wore it with pride, and it was just it's a Native American medallion that's beaded. And, those things, if you were to purchase one like he had, would be, $400 for each one of them. And he was gifted that at a Lakota Nation tournament, and wore it proudly ever after that. I actually have his first one that he was ever given that kind of hangs from my pickup mirror, and it's, it's still in there. But he just really had a sense of pride for the Native American people. He was there for them when they needed him, and then they were there for my dad. My dad had cancer, and they invited him down to do a sweat, and they just said, we want to give back to you. And it was just a very unique relationship that was created just from the love of basketball.
And I specifically remember the dream catcher at big games and seeing Coach Luitjens have that on, and just interesting getting the story behind the relationships and really the story behind the story, because people were probably asking, well, what is that? What does that mean? And everything. Well, here's the meaning, and here's the story. And again, something much bigger than basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just that kind of that whole thing of we're all one. When it really comes down to it, we're playing a game, we're competing to win, but when this is all done, we're all one.
Let's talk now about the dynasty years. Lance, correct me if I'm wrong. You played on the varsity as an 8th grader, correct?
Yes.
So we're in your era, playing for your dad, coach-son relationship. When did you first kind of realize that, hey, we could be on to kind of a dynasty era here with some of the personnel we have and just the success that your dad was known for as a program builder?
Great question. I think part of what my dad created was this atmosphere and community of believing in yourself that we can win. And so we made some state tournaments when I was younger and I got to watch them. But a lot of my friends and the kids that were my age, that was always our focus and our dream, is that when we get there, we're winning this thing and we're going to win it all. And, my eighth grade year, my dad, he says it's one of the decisions that he regrets, but he says that, when it came to the tournament time, we went to the state tournament my eighth grade year, and he elected to give somebody else my uniform because there was, he wasn't sure if I was ready to handle all the heat that was going to come from that. And so I didn't get to suit up for the state tournament. And that was the year that a lot of people remember. It was the blizzard of '88 out in Rapid City. And we were ahead of Ron Colley by, I think it was 7, 8, 9 points in the fourth quarter. And the lights went out in the Civic Center. And about an hour later, they resumed play, and all of our Custer's momentum was gone. And my dad just says, I needed another guard. I needed another point guard. And so Custer ends up getting fifth that year. And it was just known by everybody on the team that we're going back and we're winning. And that it was that next year that we came, and, we had Trevor Long was a senior. My dad coached Terry Long into Smet to 2 state championships. And so that was Trevor's senior year. We had some great senior leadership or senior players on that team. And we ended up going 25-0. Ironically, Phoenix was a team that people will know that we met up with in the championship game quite often. And they were one of the teams that were supposed to make it that year. And Red Cloud upset them. And Red Cloud ends up making the state championship game. And it was the same team that we played in the Lakota Nation championship, and we beat them by 6. And so here we are, Custer versus Red Cloud state championship. We're 24-0, and we go in, and it was just a barn burner type of a game. We end up making free throws, a lot of them at the end. And we beat Red Cloud to cap off a 25-0 season there with a lot of players that I knew personally there from Red Cloud. But that's, you ask when it started. When I was an 8th grader, that's just, we had that mentality already. We knew that it was coming. And I think that the one thing, when I talked with some of my teammates, when I talked with Jay Steele and Lane Austinson and Derek Ballard and Tim Hazlett, we never stepped onto the floor and thought we were going to lose a game. And it wasn't necessarily this cockiness. There was some humility to it. There was this confidence about it that no matter what the score was, no matter the situation, no matter who we were playing, we just thought we were going to win. And I think that, that is an ingredient that I have to give my dad credit for instilling in us. And, it's missing in a lot of teams and kids today. Just that idea, that thought that we're never out of it and we are going to win. And that is kind of what propelled us through that era that you're talking about, Todd, where we ended up in 5 straight state championship games, winning 3 of them.
And you talk about getting your players to believe, Lance, and completely agree with you on that. The great ones instill that sense of belief that no matter the situation, because again, 14 to 18-year-old kids, anybody, you're going to have an off night. But to respond from that, to have a chance to play hard, to do that, and especially with the success that you guys had during that run, I mean, your game was circled on the calendar of everybody. I mean, you took everybody's best shot. And I always tell people that some of the hardest years in coaching, and I happen to have a couple of those experiences with my own teams, are when you have a lot of talent and you're going to win a lot of games, but you're taking everybody's best shot. The question I have for you is, during that time, how did Coach Luitjens kind of steady the ship, so to say? I mean, to have that consistency of belief, maybe not to get too high or to get too low. What are some examples of things that he did with you guys to keep that momentum going?
That's a great question, Nate. And it's something that, that I don't think he necessarily learned it anywhere, but he sure did master it. And I think that if you go back to just beginning to build the program, one of the things that Kurt Wienekamp told me, who was on the team way back in '73, he said there was this all-in mentality that we're all in this together. This is about Custer. It's not about me, and everybody has a role to play, and when I was talking with some different people, they said, if you're a starter, you all have different roles. The bench has a role to play. But with my dad, so did the student manager. And so did the statistician. And he would talk to all of them and he would say, you don't understand. You are important to this team and to our success. And everybody had a role and everybody accepted it. Even if you thought, well, I kind of want my role to be the shooter, the scorer. Well, for us to win, your role is to be the defender and the rebounder. Okay, I'll do it. And I think that the next piece is really knowing how to motivate people individually. Because I think some coaches would just say, I'm just a hard coach and I'm going to treat everyone the same and you're going to get the same motivation. Well, my dad treated everyone the same. Everyone was equal, but not everyone received the same motivation. On my team, I remember Jay Steele, he was the type of player that when he messed up, he needed a butt chewing and he needed you to get in his grill and chew him out. And, but Derek Ballard didn't need Derek Ballard needed you just to bite a little and now let you think about it. And when I messed up, he didn't have to say anything to me because he knew I knew what I did. So he might bring me out, sit me on the bench, and then he said, are you ready? And I'd go back in. And he just knew what each person needed, and he knew that they needed it at the right time. I was talking with I was talking with Derek Ballard, and Derek said, your dad had the uncanny ability to absolutely rip me and take me so that he just decreased me 2 or 3 inches in size. But by the time practice was done, I felt 10 feet tall. And I thought, Derek, that is the perfect way to describe it. He knew exactly what you needed, but then he knew how to maximize what you were going to do and maximize your potential by building you back up. And he even told one of his assistant coaches, he said, Neil Seeger was his name. He's a famous coach in Custer, as a longtime assistant of my dad's. And he said, Neil, if I ever get after somebody in a game and a practice, you come up to me long before practice is over and you remind me that I got to rebuild them back up. It was one of Neil's jobs. And so I think that is what helped create what you just asked, Nate, is that nobody put the team and winning on their own shoulders. It was just we're all in this together. And my dad knew how to orchestrate that to give you a role. You accepted your role, and the goal was the championship, not my stats. There's a big board in Custer right now that has all the stats in it, and that came long after me because we never talked about stats. I have no clue when I scored my 1,000th point in Custer. I didn't even know I scored 1,000 points. And now they stop a game, and you get a plaque, and you scored 1,000, and let's spread it out in social media. We didn't care about that in Custer. And so those are some of the things that are a little unique compared to what we hear today.
And such great insight, Lance. You can scheme, you can plan, you can strategize, you can put everything in. At the end of the day in coaching, we're in the people business. And we're in the business of working individually with people to find out what their strengths are, how they can contribute to the team. And I love it that he had the mentality and stress that the star of the team is the team, right? And I can just give a quick story here of Schlekeway's experience with Coach Luitjens and just kind of how he worked with us. In the summer of '96, Todd and I were selected to play in the South Dakota versus Wyoming All-Star game. And our training ground for 3 days was Custer and Custer High School. And we trained at the high school. They put us in the basement at the Catholic church where we stayed. But the one thing I remember, and when you look at a quality of a great coach, and my experience with Larry Luitjens was just that instant sense of belonging. We walked into that gym. He made us feel like, just made us feel important. And I think that's, and confident in that. And now we went through a tough practice. This wasn't a typical all-star game practice. We got 10 guys. We're running fast break drills. We're banging around and doing all of that. But I just remember him taking time to visit to all of us. And then Schleck and I and a couple players, he took us into his office. And I specifically remember watching the '96 NBA Finals. It was the Bulls and the Sonics. He's like, guys, let's come on in and let's watch this. And we lost the first night in Custer. But those games got competitive and there was a lot of pride in there, and we had to turn around and play in Campbell County. But some of the things he said to us to build us up, we went into Campbell County and won that one by 20 points. The second game. But even though it was a short time, I know that just had a big impact on on me to play for the legend, to be coached by him. But after 3 days, I was ready to run through a wall for the guy. And I think just even in that short amount of time, the impact that he had on a lot of us was pretty special and a lifelong memory. So to kind of illustrate the point and our personal connection with that, that's our Larry Luitjens story.
I appreciate you saying that. It's just, I talk with all the people that had him for 4 years or had him for a couple of years, and, there's some obvious impact that happens with them, but the fact that you say he had an impact on you in 3 days. And I guarantee you, Nate, that when you lost that first game, he went home and he watched a video and he said, here's how we're going to orchestrate a win tomorrow because I don't lose to someone twice.
Yeah. Well, and even though it was a short amount of time, obviously, Schleck and I are watching from afar, and we're kids and we're watching your teams at Custer. We're watching, I didn't have a chance to know him, but when you were playing at Northern, he came to so many of your games and he was there and all of that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's Coach Luitjens and all that. Didn't know him, but we had a short time with him, but you knew that he was the real deal. And just awesome memory.
Yeah. Appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome.
Transition to 3 more sponsor ads at this time. Insights. They're the folks who helped us with the visual assets to bring this podcast to life. And I can tell you, they don't just make things look good. They dive in, ask the right questions, and come back with ideas that actually work. Whether it's branding, campaigns, or creative strategy, Insight has a way of helping businesses stand out and connect with people in meaningful ways. If you're looking for a partner to make an impact on your business, check them out at insightmarketingdesign.com.
And if you're looking for trusted financial guidance close to home, visit Charles Schwab's Sioux Falls, South Dakota branch, your local investment firm. Led by Lonnie Struckman and Zach Hansen, financial consultants with over 25 years of combined experience, their team is here to help you reach your financial goals. Whether you're planning, investing, or just have questions, Lonnie, Zach, and their team put clients first every time. Call 605-231-4844 or search Schwab Sioux Falls at schwab.com to book your appointment today. Charles Schwab, own your tomorrow.
And I'd also like to acknowledge Tiefenthaler Real Estate with Hague Realtors. For over 30 years, Pat and Pam Tiefenthaler of Tiefenthaler Real Estate with Hague Realtors have been trusted names in and around the Sioux Falls community. Building relationships that last, they're humbled and honored to serve buyers and sellers with care and expertise. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or navigating a move because life happens, Pat and Pam will walk beside you, guide you every step of the way. Call Pat or Pam at Tiefenthaler Homes with Hague Realtors today, your trusted partners in Sioux Falls. Visit tiefteam.ag.com or call 605-321-0550. Lance, we always like to ask many of our guests about legacy, and Coach Luitjens, has left quite a legacy in South Dakota basketball circles that certainly has transcended the sport of basketball. But peel back the curtain a little bit. Who was your dad off the court? What would you like his legacy to be?
I think if he were still here, he wanted to win. He wanted to be the best he could be when it came to coaching. But truly with him, and this is going to sound cliche, and anybody could say this, but truly to him, it was about relationships. And I think I was talking to Jay Steele, and Jay Steele said something that I just thought, holy cow, Jay, that was profound. He said, your dad uses the game as a gateway to friendships. And he said that he didn't just influence me, he influenced my children, obviously through Jim. And I think that if my dad was able to say something, he would want to say, I hope that this wasn't all just about basketball, because it was at the time, but at the same time it wasn't. He would want it to be about, how did I make an impact? How did I influence other people? I know one of his most proud accomplishments, I guess you could say, would be that relationship that he had with the Native American community, to give you one example. But I think the other one is the responses that his players have when he comes up or they start talking about him and the impact that they had on their lives that they're still carrying today. I think that's the biggest thing that he would be proud of. Who is he? He's just a happy-go-lucky, fun, positive guy. Asked Tim Hazlett, I said, what's the first thing you think of when you think of my dad? And he said, enthusiasm and positivity. I never known the man to have a bad day. And that was who he was off the floor. That's who he was on the floor. And so that's probably the best way that I can answer it. He never met someone that he didn't say, I want this person to be my friend. I tell the joke about my dad's goal was to make a friend in an elevator, even though my daughters are like, Grandpa, you don't talk to people in elevators. And he wanted to, by the time this elevator hits the bottom, we're going to be friends. And that's who my dad was.
Lance, I can say when we both started our administrative careers in the Sioux Falls School District, about the same time your daughters were playing basketball, saw Coach Luitjens come to a lot of games, but everybody wanted to talk to him. He was there, and I'm thinking, is Coach getting a chance to watch the game? But I know that he reveled in those relationships. He always had something nice to say. Was always checking in on me. How are things at Washington? How are the teams? How are you? How's your family? And he modeled that part of relationship building for so many of us, and what a legacy to pass down, not only for his teams, but just when you saw how he conducted himself with others in the community.
Yeah. And I think, did basketball consume my dad? Yes, it probably did. But that was the part of it that consumed him, was the relationship piece of basketball that he just longed for. It's who he was. Definitely.
That's awesome.
Bleacher Preachers!
We're going to use our Bleacher Preacher segment today to allow Lance to encourage nominations for the Larry Luitjens Coach of Influence Award. And one way to honor Coach Luitjens is what Lance pioneered several years ago. Lance, do you want to talk about the award first and the genesis of it, and then the nomination process? What's the process for South Dakotans to nominate coaches from the state to receive this award?
Absolutely. So, 3 years ago, we started this award, and after my dad had passed, I wanted to think of a way to honor him. A lot of people will, a scholarship, or they'll think of something in his name. And so, my wife and I, we've just had a lot of conversations over the years, and we just say that coaches can have such a huge impact on their players if it's done the right way. And we have seen that where it maybe hasn't been done the right way. And we wanted to emphasize, hey, this is the right way. This is the way that you can be a coach of influence, not just a coach that tries to win championships. So we came up with this award. There is a nomination process, but it kind of describes, it's not about the winningest coaches. It's really about the behind the scenes things that we have been describing. So what type of an influence do you have on your community? Do you have any type of influence on your community? And then what type of influence do you have on your players? Are you going above and beyond when it comes to those players? Some of the other things we had to add to that, though, because my dad you'd call him old school. He was always ahead of his time, but he was still old school, and discipline meant something to him. We have a shot clock now. Back then, we didn't have a shot clock, but as players, we always knew that if it was under a minute, we were looking to see, are we going for one shot? And one shot meant with about 5 or 6 seconds left, not 14 seconds left. And there was this discipline to the game. So that's still, for him, that's still part of it. My dad did not have a lot of technical fouls that came from kids in his 40-some years because you were disciplined, and you did not want to do that because you'd be sitting on the bench the rest of the game. So there's some of those aspects. There's that planning and preparation that we've talked about. So there's still the aspect of this award that goes to just people who really know how to coach well. But the more important piece of it is, what type of impact are you having on your players? And I think we've highlighted some of those stories. There's so many more that I wish I could tell. So this award, then we pick one girls basketball coach, and we pick one boys basketball coach, and we award them at whatever state tournament that they choose. And at that state tournament, they get a plaque, a really nice plaque of the Coach of Influence Award. It's got my dad's picture on it. And then we award them with a Native American beaded medallion. So this is not just a little certificate that you get or a nice $50 plaque. I mean, this is a beautiful Native American medallion. Brian Brewer, he's my connection. He has them handmade just for this.
Wow.
And then we go to the state tournament, and that coach and anybody that he had an influence on, an impact on, comes out into the middle of the floor, and we honor that coach for their influence. So, that's why I think this award is important, because I want coaches to remember that you're in coaching to have an influence, to have an impact on others as you try to win. And so, I've got, people can email me at coachluitjens@gmail.com. And that's one aspect. You can go to luitjens.award. And there's a site in there that has a way to nominate a coach that you want to nominate. And if none of that, if you can't find any of it, you can go to the state website. The South Dakota High School Activities Association has everything right there for the Larry Luitjens Coach of Influence Award, and you can nominate your coach. And just so everyone knows, if someone's nominated, they stay in discussion for the next 5 years, because there are some good coaches, and we can only pick one boys and one girls. So that's kind of the process, and that's a little bit of the purpose behind it. These first 2 years, it has been an emotional experience for the coaches who get this award. It's just really been amazing.
Yeah, that's great background on that. I would also say anybody who's listening, if Lance gave you some options there for nominations, also talk to your local high school AD, because we do get information on this from the state, and your local AD should have information on the nomination process as well. So a lot of options to get out there. Encourage our listeners. Remember those coaches who influenced you in a positive way, and were those mentors for you and made a difference in your life, and get out and nominate these coaches for what they do. And obviously with Coach Luitjens, the award being named for is just amazing. So get out, get your nominations in, and this is one of the more special honors that we have for coaches in our state.
Absolutely. Yep. It's a process. I love going through it. And so the more nominations, the better.
Kudos to you, Lance and Renee, and those who helped make that award such a signature award. And there's no better platform to award it than a state tournament in March in South Dakota. So what a great legacy. As we wrap up the episode, Lance, I wanted again to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about, number one, you're kind of an author yourself. You were involved in the Larry Luitjens Coach of Influence book with Bob Parsons. Can our viewers and listeners still obtain a copy of this? So walk through how they haven't had a chance to read it. How can someone read it?
Yes. So, when we did this first book, we didn't go through Amazon or anything like that. And so I would just have people reach out. I'm on Facebook. You can message me and ask if you can get a copy of the book. I'm going to ask for your name and address, and I'm going to say, hey, give me a little donation, because we don't have a list price on it. And that donation is going to go towards the Larry Luitjens Coach of Influence Award system. That's probably the easiest way. Again, if you know how to spell my name, you can also go to coachluitjens@gmail. And if you haven't read the book, I would definitely get one out to you for that first book that I wrote.
I've had a chance to read that book cover to cover. In fact, I got a signed copy from Coach Luitjens, and just a big part of my library of coaches that I've happened to read, and that is one of the best. Just kind of going through his experiences and some of the things that we've touched on today. So I would encourage anybody to contact Lance. It's a great book. And Lance, also another book that you've authored. Just want to give you a chance to talk about that.
Absolutely. So, the Coach of Influence book, it's got my dad coached for 47 years, and it's got 47 little Bible studies in it that all are based off of a word that he appreciated, like integrity, enthusiasm, whatever that might be. His faith was very important to him. My faith is very important to me as well, and my wife and I have started a nonprofit called It's 24/7. You can go to its247.org and kind of get a little better feel for what it's all about. But I've just finished my next book called The 40-Day Journey. And this is near and dear to my heart. There's not a lot of basketball in this one, but this is just something that for someone who is their faith is important to them and they just say, "Oh, I want to kickstart. I really want to grow my faith this year." This is a 40-day journey on how to walk in the Spirit 24/7. How can I make my faith part of who I am instead of just something I do on a Sunday? So we're pretty proud of that, and we're excited about where this new ministry is going to go.
Lance, one thing I always have appreciated growing up, guys like you and Eric Klein were role models to me, and part of that was because of your faith. You were both bold in your faith, and basketball was kind of a vessel and a platform. And so I would encourage our viewers and listeners to check out Lance's 40-day journey book.
Lance, if they're interested in that book, just contact you directly, or where are the means that they can take a look at that?
Yeah, so you could contact me directly. We're selling this off of our website, which is its247.org. And so its247.org, and it'll have a spot on there where you can purchase the book. I highly recommend going that route. It's available on Amazon, but if you go through our website, we have a way of kind of locking people into a lot more than just the book.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Lance. And again, thank you so much for giving us time to talk with Nate and I about your dad's legacy. We have a book now, we have a award, we have a podcast. I think the next step here is let's go to Hollywood and have a Larry Luitjens movie produced. And be thinking, Lance, of which A-list actor you want to play your dad, because I think that might be the next step. But so appreciative of you joining us, honoring your dad's legacy. And we're going to be promoting on this podcast the nominations for the Larry Luitjens Coach of Influence Award to come in here over the next 3 weeks.
I appreciate it. It's just been a pleasure for me to be able to reminisce and talk about those stories. And like I joked with you guys at the beginning, I don't know how I'm going to get all 250 stories in. And, that's probably saying it lightly. It kind of the closing thing that encapsulates it all is I sent a text out to about a half a dozen people just today. And I said, if you had a chance to share one story on a podcast, what would it be? 30 seconds later, my phone rings, and it's a teammate of mine, Derek Ballard. And Derek said, here's what needs to be said. He said, the journey is what I miss. He said, my most bittersweet moment was winning the state championship my senior year because I knew it was over. I relish the journey. Coming in Friday morning on Thanksgiving Friday to practice and just having your dad walk over to me and put his arm around me and say, tell me about your Thanksgiving. And he said, that's what I miss. And I think that's what coaches need to instill. It's all about the journey. So guys, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed every single second of it.
Lance, thank you so much for sharing these stories with us, for taking the time. More important, thanks for your friendship with us through the years, and always love talking hoops and talking about these things that are bigger than basketball as well too. So great to visit with you. We will get you back in our Legends series, so we'll get more into your personal basketball journey and everything on a later cast. But thanks again for coming in. Good weekend. Your Broncos won. Good luck next week with that too.
Appreciate that.
We will see you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Great to be here.
Show out, shout out.
And as we wrap up this episode of State of Hoops, it's time for our show out shout out segment. Nate, who is our show out shout out for this episode?
Well, given that we're talking about coaches of influence, I would like to give a shout out to Coach Derek Roby from O'Gorman High School here in Sioux Falls. Coach Roby recently announced that this will be his last year of coaching, and he's close to having 40 years in the business as a head coach, as an assistant coach, and just my personal relationship with Coach Roby goes back to our Aberdeen days, where I was born and raised, and Coach Roby's a Mitchell native, but he came to Northern State University, and he began his coaching career at Aberdeen Roncalli. Back in the mid to late '80s, and eventually moved into Aberdeen Central as the girls' coach first, and eventually became the boys' head coach at Aberdeen Central before he came to Sioux Falls O'Gorman, where he and had a terrific run at the places that he's been. But I never had Coach Roby as a head coach, but I had him as a teacher. Had him as a coach when he was around in some other sports, but he was one of those guys that just you knew that he cared about you, and he took a personal interest in you. He was one of the young teachers at that time, and so he would jump right in with my classmates and I. Playing basketball, playing pickleball before pickleball got popular, but him and a football coach named Steve Svensson, who a lot of people know were the coaches at Aberdeen Central at that time, and they would open up the gym for us on snow days to go and play pickleball back when you could do that. But just had a tremendous influence on me. Had an influence on my peers, our class of 1996 at Aberdeen Central, and obviously people know about Coach Roby's success, the multiple state championships, the runs, the conference championships, Coach of the Year, but he just had a tremendous positive influence on us as a crew growing up in Aberdeen. So want to shout out Coach Roby. Congrats on a great run. Wish you the best for the remainder of the year. It was great to catch up with him earlier this week when Washington and O'Gorman played, but a class act, a mentor to so many of us, and always good, especially to all coaches, but especially to the young coaches. And Coach Roby will be missed. We know that he'll be around, but wanted to give my shout out to Coach Derek Roby. Congrats, Coach.
And I will second that, Chow. During my early high school tenure, Coach Roby was the head coach of the Aberdeen College Cavaliers. My dad coached against Coach Roby. Just a remarkable tenure. The longevity, as we've talked about on the podcast, Nate, we're not going to see that as much anymore. This 40 plus year coaches. And what a remarkable run. 6 state AA boys basketball championships at O'Gorman High. And congratulations, Coach Roby and his family. Thank you for the impact you've left in South Dakota basketball circles. Well done.
Well, we're talking about a first ballot Hall of Fame coach, first ballot Hall of Fame person.
And that wraps up this episode of the State of Hoops podcast. Again, we encourage our viewers and listeners to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iHeartMedia, and Amazon Music. And you can also follow the podcast on social media on YouTube, X, and Instagram. Until next time, yours in hoops, Todd Schlekeway and Nate Malchow. Have a great day.